My name's Marie. I am Foundation Manager at D&AD. Each of the festival days is exploring a topic focused on helping new graduates and those looking to make their start in the creative industries. And today's talk is focused on how to build a career in your own time. As such, I'm delighted to shortly hand you over to today's moderator, Nikky Lyle, who is Director at Nikky Lyle Creative, who will be leading the conversation today between Benjamin Mottershead, Founder and Creative Director at Studio D&AD, Muragai, Artist and Designer, and Nikki Bullard, Chairwoman of Europe and Chief Creative Officer UK at MRM. The panel will be with you, as I said, for around an hour, and there's plenty of opportunities to ask them questions via the chat function, which we'll save for the end. So do make sure you pop those questions in that chat box below. So without further ado, I would like to hand you over to Nikki and the rest of the panel to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. I'm very excited to be a part of this, especially as a creative recruiter that's observed over the years the need for these sorts of talks to really arm you all with the information you need to get a good start into the industry. So my first question really to our amazing panel is a quick intro to where you work and what kind of work you make. Muragai, would you mind starting us off, please?
Sure thing, yeah. Hi, my name is Muragai, and I'm an artist and designer, illustrator, and my style, the work that I make is very influenced on the mixed heritage that kind of sums up my experience. I'm a parents originally from Sri Lanka, and I was brought up in the UK. So I tend to pull references from both Eastern and Western and mix them together and make up an art style.
Thank you. And Nikki, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, everybody. Delighted to be here. So I am Nikki Bullard, and I have a dual role really. So I'm creative, but I'm also on the business side, which is quite a different thing, but really exciting. And I can talk about that later. I work for MRM. We're part of McCann World Group, and we're what's called a customer relationship agency. So our role is to really build and grow deep relationships between brands and consumers or customers, people, real people, and that's the way we look at it. So we can do anything from a CRM campaigns and things for an insurance company, all the way through to a big global advertisement for UN Women. So there's a real breadth of things that we do. But yeah, really exciting and delighted to be here.
And also last, but by no means least, Ben.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Ben, I'm the founder and creative director of Studio D&AD. We're a 360 design agency focusing on everything from brand identity, animation, motion graphics, illustration, social media content design and strategy. We're very audience-based and consumer-based in our focus with our work, and a lot of our energy goes into humanizing the audience in the eyes of the brand and to help the brands kind of understand who they're talking to and recognize that they're people, not ones and zeros, and they have their own kind of aspirations, values and personalities which can be tapped into. And alongside that, we're always kind of internally asking, is what we create fun? Does it entertain people? And will people engage with it?
So the main question that I want to really start with is, did you always know this is where you wanted to be and what you wanted to do? Whoever wants to go.
No, I didn't know I wanted to go into design until I was about 19. I wanted to go into sports science and be an athlete, I guess. I always had an interest in art and design, but it definitely wasn't high up on my list. I enjoyed sport a lot more, enjoyed fitness a lot more. But when I was in my final year of sixth form, at the Christmas, I had a very bad faculty at my sixth form who put me off the idea of doing sports science and decided to go do a foundation year at my local college. Did that for a year. It's probably one of the most defining and best academic years of my life. It really made me realize what I wanted to do in the sense of, creativity. I didn't even know I wanted to go into specialize in design until the Christmas of that year, because I was stuck between fine art and design. I ultimately chose design, one, because it offered a slightly better employability than fine art, and but ultimately I just wanted to do, you know, make a living out of something I loved. And I think I just decided to, you know, go with my gut choice with that. But design was never something I imagined I'd be doing 10 years ago.
I always wanted to do be a writer, so I knew that it was one thing I was kind of quite good at school. This is probably the only thing, to be fair. Definitely wasn't good at sport, so I couldn't have tried that out. So I love writing. I wanted to be a journalist originally, and I spent a couple of my summer holidays in my early teens working on the local newspaper. So I wrote to them, and it was really cool because I'd sit with a junior reporter and we'd drive around, go to courts, write stories about people who had lost their driving licenses and things like that, which doesn't sound very exciting, but it was at the time. And then probably the most bizarre thing ever happened to me, and that careers officer talked to me about copywriting. And I went, oh my God, that's what I want to do. I'd had all these years I wanted to be a journalist, thought, I want to write ads. That's what I want to do. This is so exciting. I love TV. And was lucky enough to get into Hounslow College, which is one of the hottest colleges at the time, and absolutely loved it and would not do anything else. I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was a child, I think I wanted to just be Batman for a long time. Power Ranger. But I think when I was 16, I started to realize that I was very interested in art, and I spent a lot of my spare time drawing and making things. And yeah, I knew for a very long time that from that age that I wanted to be an artist. But sadly, I decided to ask my parents, hey, I want to be an artist. Can I do that? And they said no. They said that I needed to find a job that had a regular income, something that was a bit more safe, still connected to the art industry. So I ended up training as an architect for 7 years before leaving that industry and then finally making it to art and illustration. So yeah, I've had a long journey to get to this point.
Do you look back on that time as wasted time doing architecture? Or do you think it was really kind of to help define you as an artist now?
Not at all. I went to Kingston University to study architecture. And if anyone knows anything about that uni, you are surrounded by artists, graphic designers, illustrators, product designers, all sorts of creative people. And I think training in architecture gave me a really good foundation. And it also, what it did was give me a certain set of experiences in my design skills that I now apply to my illustration. I do a lot of busy compositions, and I often get told that my compositions are kind of really kind of interesting and you know, they don't really know where they come from. It must come from my training in architecture and understanding space and negative space. So yeah, I look back on it very fondly, definitely.
Yeah, I always find that so interesting about our industry, is all the different routes that everyone's taken. I mean, I actually wanted to become a graphic designer myself, and I studied visual communication at college, but then my parents said to me, no, Nikki, you have to do photography, it's more of a trade. And so they sent me down that route. And then actually through that degree, you learn about bringing on clients and how you do all that as a photographer, which I weirdly applied to then becoming a creative recruiter, which then got back to working with graphic designers, met loads of friends at university that are now at director level of their own agencies or very senior. So it's funny how you can sometimes get nudged into different directions, but it can still lead to the path that you wanted to go down. So
also, I think there's something to be said, you know, in that kind of pollination of being involved in different things. You know, even just my short career, I started off in branding, went into animation and motion design, then went into digital and web design. Then I was a copywriter and strategist for a little bit. And each time it's just allowed me to kind of learn more about these different things and how they can come together and then sort of how they can co-inhabit the same environments. And that can all kind of strengthen your resolve and actually just help you kind of realize what you do enjoy, because part of life isn't just about finding out what you want to do, it's actually learning what you don't enjoy, and that will always define your choices much more heavily, I find.
So don't underestimate any experience. I think, you know, the experience I got from working in a newspaper shop, right, on a Sunday, or when I worked in the supermarket on the delicatessen, and all those little part-time jobs and cleaner, and in a photography studio, all those things build up to who you are, and all those experiences. And like you say, I mean, I'm quite fatalistic, but I do think your route is kind of predetermined. So you pick up all this stuff. You don't realize you're doing it at the time. It's a bit like Lara Croft picking up her energy packs. I think all these things that happen along the way are building us up to be the person that we'll continue to be, and we'll keep building and growing. And even if it's a bad experience, like you say, it's still valuable.
I think also, just quickly adding on to that before obviously we shift to another topic. I was never meant to go into art and design. For my A-levels, I chose religious studies, media, sports science, and English. I didn't have art, but that year I went to a new school, and they weren't running the belief, philosophy, and ethics course because they didn't have enough interest. So I was stuck in the middle of this hole, didn't know what I was going to do, and turned around, and behind me was the art table, and I just went and signed up. And like, I think what you're saying there, Nikki, like life being kind of preordained almost is quite interesting, because if it wasn't for that one moment in my life, I may never be doing this right now. I could have been doing something different. And I think it's kind of, you know, holding on to those sort of memories is kind of nice. It'll kind of make you have a feel like you've got a bit of a purpose as you move through your career and obviously your lifespan.
Yeah, definitely. So what do values actually mean to all of you within your creative career? And how did that help you find your own paths?
Quite interesting. I was thinking about this, and I don't think my creative values are any different from my normal values. So I think it's really interesting. I think the first one about being kind and how important that is. And, you know, it can be difficult as you go through your career. The more senior you become, the more difficult some decisions can be. But even in a difficult decision, you can still be kind to people. Kindness begets kindness. And it's just good karma. And I'm sounding like a right hippie. I'm going on about faces. Hey, so I think the other thing is about generosity, being as generous with your time as you can be. I know it's really difficult, but also, you know, being generous when you're judging work, because, you know, your own biases towards what's good doesn't necessarily mean what you think is great, and being generous and bringing people into the conversation. Honesty is really important. Going back to kindness, you can be kind and honest, but really, you know, if something's not right, accepting it's not right if it's you, and being honest to yourself, but also being honest with someone else. If you're saying, do you know what, I just don't think that's quite as good as it could be. Not that it's crap, it's not as good as it could be, because you'll hate yourself if you don't say it, because it'll be niggling you. You'll have that thing about, why don't we change that thing? And the final one for me is to be grateful. I'm just grateful, you know, that I have sort of stumbled into this career, and I work around such brilliant people, and I get to do stuff like this, and I've met new people today on this call, all of you, and we're so lucky. We're surrounded by interesting, vibrant, exciting, crazy, wonderful people, and yeah, so that I'm always feeling that.
Yeah, I would say very similar things. I would say that kindness is one of the most important things that you could have in life and in work. You tend to work with people for a long time. You tend to build relationships over a long period of time. And it's really nice to just set up a good relationship by being kind to one another. The one other one I would add on top of that is follow the fun, which is if something is not fun anymore, stop doing it, basically, because we are in an industry where we tend to work for a long period of time on a project. And if it's, I don't know, if something starts to not be fun anymore, it starts to kind of grate at you and get at you. And yeah, that would be my one to add on top of what Nikki has just said, follow the fun.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really have specific values I kind of follow, but I do feel values are kind of everything in your career and life in general. But I think, like with everything, they change and adapt as you grow as a person, and your values can be quite fluid. And I think for me, I try to be very mindful of my personal values, but I also try not to kind of be held ransom by them and making big decisions in my, you know, business or in my own life. My values have kind of developed through personal shared experience and personal empathy for others. I have ADHD. I've been made redundant 3 times. I quit my last job because of really badly declining mental health. I've been treated appallingly in some jobs and amazing in others. I have a brother who's gay, and as a result, all of these things have kind of shaped how I see the world, and how we've kind of built the agency. You know, we run a 4-day-a-week studio. so we can take more time off to kind of focus on the things that allow us to grow outside of work. We try and be the best allies as possible to the LGBTQ community. I'm a hugely outspoken advocate for the abolishment of unpaid labour and internships, and I champion, better mental health reform and accessibility within the workplace, because all of those things have affected me at some point in my life and kind of adapted how my values sit. I don't think values are set in stone. I think they kind of are fluid, they change, which is kind of why I say you shouldn't be held ransom to your values. Everyone is different. And I think as designers and creative people, our biggest strength is our ability to empathize with others. Because we create work for everyone, or like at least a large demographic of people. We never create work just for our small corner of the world. And I think, your values are often things you can use as a guiding light, especially at the beginning of your career. And I think if you have quite strong values at the moment, they can be amazing things to help you kind of make the right decisions for where you sit in the current moment. But I definitely feel as you grow, those values will change. And it's important to just always keep an open mind, always keep kind of empathy and compassion for others, because even people who may not have the same values as you will have a reason for why they have values. And if you can understand why people have their own values, you can just create better relationships and better work.
Yeah, I think kindness, I love that that's been mentioned, because that's really important. Whenever I recruit for agencies, they always say no egos. And if you've got person A and person B, and they're both equal in skills and ability and talent, and person A is lovely, a real pleasure to work with, and person B is pain, who are you going to choose? And also pay it forward with kindness, because people can be so generous in this industry, and be appreciative of people's time as well, especially if someone senior gives you time and helps you. They're actually carving time out of a very busy schedule to help you out. So just being appreciative of that as well will go a really long way. Have either of you ever felt that certain projects have been out of line with your values? And if so, what did you do?
I've only had it happen once. It was when I was working in a motion agency, and they did a bit of, I guess it's called, is it blacklist work, or work that doesn't really ever appear in the portfolio. And it was for a tobacco company out in Asia. And for me, I've like cancer runs in my family. My grand's had a load of, it is there. And I've always been very firm about this idea that I would never work for a tobacco brand, just for the personal reasons. But at the same time, it was a big win for the agency I was at. It was a small agency. They had an enormous budget, as you can imagine, kind of clients out in that part of the world would have. It meant they could bankroll all their overheads for like a good few months. When you work in those kind of smaller agencies, and even in kind of the teams, you kind of build like a family dynamic, and you want each other to win and succeed. And in that situation, the lead designer who did smoke took on the project. So I didn't have too much involvement, but I did make it kind of clear that I wasn't happy. I wouldn't be very happy about working on a project like that. And it goes both ways. You develop a kind of family dynamic, and ultimately you shouldn't be afraid you should never be in a workplace that makes you feel afraid of having kind of a voice. And I think if you go to your manager and you're really unhappy about a certain project that comes in that affects one of your values in a very deep way, you should be able to air that to your management, and they shouldn't respond in a hostile way. They should try and find a middle ground at how they can mediate that situation, which is how all good managers operate. So I think for anyone watching this who's worried about that side of things, I do think that a sign of a good workplace is how the management treat their staff in every way. And if you get responded to in a hostile manner, that says a lot more about the place you're working than what your values are like.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't personally had that, but I've been lucky enough. I've not had that moment where I've thought, I really can't work on this. But I have had people come to me and do exactly what you were just talking about, Ben. And for me, I think that's amazing that to have, just to come and tell me, because it works both ways, actually. One, you don't want anybody to do something that they don't passionately believe in. And actually, you're not going to get the best work out of something that someone doesn't passionately believe in and buy into. So it's a mad decision to say, no, you've got to do it, which is unfair. And as you say, Ben, you have to question who you're working for at that point.
Yeah, I also haven't had any experiences like that, but I would say that before a project starts, I do ask myself, am I the right person for this job? Will I enjoy it? Is it something that I we'll look forward to talking about in the future, that kind of thing. And that kind of sets the values quite early on. And I will say no if it's not something that, works for me, basically. So I try and avoid a lot of those issues at the very beginning. Yeah.
I think Simon Dixon says it quite well, because he says you should be your client's biggest fan. And we call them studio friends at D&D. We don't call them clients. But I think you should always want to be their fan of whatever they're doing. You should want to champion them. And I think if you've got someone in your team who doesn't feel they can do that, or you can't personally do that, then either work the team dynamic around so they don't have to be necessarily involved, so they feel more comfortable. You get a happier team part of, like, as Nikky just said, who work harder. Or if they don't fall under the studio, the studio banner of being something you would want to champion, I think it's on most people, every business leader's kind of plate to actually ask, should we be doing this project then? Because you'll always have the issues with kind of covering overheads, of wanting to bring in money, of covering turnover. But I think it's sometimes slightly unethical of companies to take on projects which they know are kind of against their own internal ethos, and then having to make their staff do the work. So it's a tricky one. I think a lot of it comes down to ethics, but you develop your ethics as you work through the industry and discover what you kind of enjoy.
Yeah, I've got a job that is for a food client. I'm gonna be as as non-spoilery as possible because of my NDA. But I'm like 90% a vegan, and this restaurant serves all kinds of foods. And many of my friends who I've spoken to have been like, how do you feel about that? And I've said, well, it's only for a certain sector of this particular client, and it's got nothing to do with meat, so I'm okay. Yeah. But I do have a list of people that I probably would say no to off the bat, just straight away, based on their own particular industry, which is a small list, thankfully. But yeah.
Well, it gets harder to hire your client. Like the big agencies work for like brands that are normally all owned by the same 5 conglomerates, and they all kind of donate to certain political parties, or they're involved in certain activities and etc. And if you start going too deep in this industry, you're going to have a very hard time, because once you start to realize how connected everything is, and actually I personally, for me, like when I was going through the industry, it was difficult, because I sort of had a moment where I realized I'm working in a hyper privatized industry for clients that often are very kind of focused on selling product. And I think what you both kind of touched on, those top line values are probably what you're best off putting your eyesights on, because if you start going deeper than that and you start trying to pull apart any sort of specific values, I think you'll just struggle as you start off in the industry. It's better just to be like, be kind, be compassionate, have empathy, be a good human is probably a good value to have.
Yeah, some really, really good answers there about all of that. And how did each of you individually find the right career homes for yourselves as to where you are now? How did you navigate everything we just discussed?
And I certainly haven't navigated anything. I've just I feel like I'm on some sort of surfboard, going back to the hippie thing again. I've done bodyboarding because I can't get up on a surfboard. But I feel like I've ridden this wave for the whole of my career, and at some point I'm going to get on the beach and I'm going to find out where I am. I love my job, and I had quite an unhappy start, my first job, where I really knew I was in the wrong place, but I didn't do anything about it. And back to what you were saying, Ben, and you were saying, if you really feel like it's not the right place, get out of there as quickly as you can, because it'll end up damaging you, which you learn from it as well. But I think that's really important, knowing what isn't the right place. But I do think it's really interesting, and I've noticed this throughout my career about you. When you work with someone, you think they weren't in the right role, probably working with you, and then they go somewhere else and then they absolutely knock it out the park, and suddenly they're promoted 6 times up and they're doing this and that. And I think genuinely it's about where the sun shines on you is where you're going to do your best work. And you don't always know what it is. You can't know that. You might be looking from afar at an agency saying, wow, they're doing great work. But you might turn up and the people around you aren't helping you grow and aren't helping you to create the kind of work you want. So it's really difficult to plan where the right place is. I think you find yourself there, and then, that's my personal experience anyway.
Yeah, from my own personal experience, it took a very long time because I trained as an architect, and I enjoyed the first few years because it was learning something new and it was exciting, and it was, first few years of university and all of the stuff that goes along with that. But near the end of the course, I realized it wasn't for me. And my project started to get a lot more arty, if you will. I started to make posters for the buildings I was designing. I started to make drawings that were far more extravagant than my average construction drawings. And that was a big kind of, oh no, what have I done? But thankfully I had friends, family around me that were like, do what makes you happy. So I think it was 2012 that I then went into illustration and graphic design and design. And I was really struggling because I'd never trained. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I then decided to get some experience working as a graphic designer / illustrator at a greeting card company for a year. Realized that wasn't for me. And then I worked for a restaurant chain as a graphic designer, realized that wasn't for me. But every time I was in those positions, I was learning more and more about myself. And I was learning that I wanted to be my own boss, design my own things, and not really have too many people above me basically telling me what to do. And that's eventually when I realized that I wanted to be my own kind of designer, if you will. Even then, I had various different art styles that have changed and changed every couple of years until very recently, where I found one that really fitted my style, my sensibility, and who I was. And I started drawing in 2012, and then what are we now, 2020, and I've only just realized what I've been doing is good. So it's taken a long time to get to this position.
Yeah, I think it's just important to work out what you enjoy and what gives you fulfillment, which I know is kind of a vague answer, and a lot of people will have heard that so many times, but you're the only you as an individual is the only person who truly knows what they enjoy and who they are and what gives them fulfillment. And you the only kind of knows your true self, and a lot of finding the right place is finding somewhere that allows you to be your best self, as kind of Nikky put it. I think if you're someone who really likes helping people, then maybe working in-house at a charity is a much better fit. You don't all have to chase top 10 agency positions. If you want to work for the best brands in the world, go and work your way towards being in a large agency. But I think happiness comes about when you're allowed to be your best self in an environment you're making the most impact and positive impact on yourself as an individual and the people you're working for. I think you need to sort of work out what you're aiming for and recognize that it will just take time to reach that point. I mean, I spent 7 years working in every creative job you can think of until I kind of realized the thing I wanted to do was run my own business. I wanted to be in charge of my own life. And then since I took that decision 2-3 years ago, I have never been happier. And because I'm allowed to do everything I'd always wanted to do. Life is long, and I think there will always be challenges, and there will always be more money to earn, and there will always be better ways to improve yourself. However, that's in the future, and the future is completely unknown, and we live in the present, and a time where I fully believe we need to kind of be more constantly mindful and, focus on. I think, it's really important that you kind of people stop living, especially in your early days of your career. It's really important that you don't live for the approval of someone else, to sort of give the approval to what you want to do with your own life. I think, you have it in you to kind of take control of what makes you happy, to set your sights on it, and accept that you'll have so many failures along the way, and let yourself get used to that idea and the idea of failing, and have confidence that if you can overcome those failures, you can kind of do anything you want. And, I just have always said, a chance taken is always better than an opportunity never realized. And I think that's what you want to be doing when you go into the industry. Be open to everything, experience everything, fail at everything, and you'll get to the point you need to get to, whether that's in 2 years or 20.
I think also at that early age, a lot of people don't really know who they are as well. I struggled with that quite a lot. I was constantly asking others, what am I good at? What kind of type of person am I? And it took a very long time, and it took making work to actually identify the person I wanted to be, and the type of work I wanted to make. And I'd make a series of work over the course of a few years and realize, well, I definitely don't want to do that again, and I definitely I'm not interested in that. And I started to slowly filter out the kind of positive things about the work that I could then take forward into future pieces of work. And I guess that's a lot more difficult when you're working in an agency, but it's still something that you can do on a regular basis, that kind of value exercise where you're, talking to yourself and saying, well, I really enjoyed that part of the job. Maybe I could, focus more on that a little bit, that kind of thing.
I think it comes back to what Nikki was saying. It's about trying to find that wave you can ride. And no matter what happens when you're on that wave, things will come along, but they'll just add to you as a person, add to your career and add to your profession. And I think the early days of your career are about just trying to find that correct wave to be able to sit on and just move forward with. But like I said, we live in a world of like instant gratification. Everything's metric based, more likes, more comments, more shares. But that's on the digital world, and this is reality. And life happens at half speed or quarter speed in reality. So the important thing is to just not get too fixated on where you're going to be in 5 years, and just focus on living in the moment. Because if you live in the moment, you'll recognize the wave when it comes along, and you'll just be able to kind of enjoy it.
Well, guys, follow the fun. If it ain't fun, get out of it. Because it is now, there's a difference between being difficult and it not being fun, right? Because things can be difficult, and there's an absolute joy on when you're sitting there, you're panicking, you think, I'm never going to crack this, I'm never going to crack this, I'm never going to crack this. And suddenly ping, something happens and you've cracked it. It's not about giving up when it's difficult, but it's about if you're really not enjoying it and you feel uncomfortable where you are, go somewhere else and enjoy it. But stick it out when it's difficult. That's not fun. But if it's really, creativity is all about gut instinct and going with what you believe and what you think is right and trying stuff. So it's not a bad thing to go with your gut instinct and think, this isn't the right place for me, so I'm going to try something else. And a bit like Ben said, he's tried so many different things, and he's on that wave of, he knows exactly where he's going. Carry him away.
And I think another thing for graduates is it's amazing, anyone that's tuned in and heard all about your own journeys, because you look at people and you think, oh, they're really successful and how they've done it. And for people to actually hear about exploring, finding the fun and the failures, it's really important that people understand that you will fail at things loads and loads of times. But also, some advice I have is don't be too seduced by glossy websites and nice names and brands. Go and interview, because if you have a really good connection with the hiring manager or whoever's going to take you under their wing as a grad and help you grow and develop, sometimes that's more important than getting the real feel for a company as to who you're going to be working with, because you're a person working with lots of people, and it's finding that right, culture fit for you as an individual, as well as just
absolutely. It's not the jobs are rarely, the job is rarely the thing that isn't working. It will be the community you're working within. And as we all said about this kindness, if you're working with people or somebody, or your manager's not kind, and that's not a great place to work, or you meet someone, you think, I've got an instinct about this, or we're not clicking, or there's something they said which doesn't sit right with me. It's really good to challenge yourself around that, because agencies aren't about the work, they're about the people who create the work, and that's what it's all about. It's about the people around you, and that's who you're going to learn from and grow with. And
I remember when I graduated, I did exactly what Nikki just said. I would sit online, and if I went to a website and I didn't like the look of the website design or the portfolio, I didn't apply. That was one of the biggest probably mistakes I've made in my career, was judging someone's highlights reel based off how competent they are. And I think when you're just starting out, people are what make an agency. Culture is what makes an agency. Friday drinks is not a culture. Friday drinks is like a perk. Like having a table tennis table in the lobby is not a workplace culture. Culture is, are they going to help you achieve your personal goals? Are they going to allow progression for you? Are they going to make you a happy person? And are they going to make you a better person? And like we come back to earlier with those values, are they going to help increase your values? And the best workplaces, regardless of how big they are, can see what your values are, and they will help you make those values stronger. So that's a good piece of advice for graduates to take away. Do not just go on a website and go, oh, the website's a bit shit, so therefore I shouldn't apply. Like Jack Renwick doesn't even have a website. They have a landing page, and she's an absolute gem to work for. But if you didn't know who Jack Renwick was, and you're coming out and you went to a landing page that had no work on it, you'd be like, oh, I'm not going to that. But so yeah, it's definitely a trap you can fall into just after you graduate.
Yeah, definitely. And so how do you each balance the expectations of the work you want to create, but the realities of working in a commercial industry?
Right.
A big question.
I mean, I can go first if you want.
Yeah.
I don't, I sound like I'm being impertinent. I don't think it's a balance. I think you should want everything you do to give something to you. So I'm super lucky. I've got some brilliant commercial clients. I've got some great purpose-led clients. So like I said, UN Women, Miscarriage Association, and did lots of wonderful stuff with them. But I also get real joy out of doing the commercial stuff. And I tell you why, because I can quantify and see a result. So I'm very much from a direct marketing background. So I love seeing results. I love seeing sales going up. I love this. I like to know, have validation. It's a bit like awards, validation for the work that I do. So I do get a joy of it. I love a tricky problem. You know, I think as graduates, you're going to go into businesses and you're not going to be given the most glamorous brief in the world. In fact, you'll probably be given the least glamorous brief in the world. If you can take that brief and do something excellent with it, it might not be something that wins a pencil at D&AD, but it's something that's really beautifully designed or beautifully written, or, you know, you found an insight that the client didn't really realize, or, you know, something that really shines in that piece of work. That's how you'll push your career forward. So not going into an agency and thinking, wow, I'm going to jump onto that UN Women brief. That's not how it works. So make the most of every opportunity you're given, because if you're great and you're good, you will definitely shine, even in the smallest thing, like a text, an SMS. If you're asked to do that, it could be a brief that comes onto your desk. Think of the things already in your head that are going around that you could do around that. There's so many things you can play with. So yeah, I think it's embrace everything. Everything has its merits. Everything can bring you joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that from my own point of view, personal work is one of the most important things that any designer, illustrator could make. And what I've found is that a lot of my clients will pick a piece of personal work and say, can we have that, please, but with our logo on it, or, you know, incorporating some of our ideas with the brief. And had I not made those personal pieces of work, that I wouldn't have gotten those jobs. It's a very, I'm now in the position where I'm doing a lot of commercial work, and I love it all because it is stemmed from a lot of my personal drawings. And I tend to have I speak to other illustrators and they're like, what are you working on next? I'm like, I can't wait to get back to this personal piece that I've got an idea for, because I know that it will drive future projects down the line. So I'm constantly trying to do a personal piece every week if I can, but every other project for me is always a personal piece.
I think that's so brilliant, because I just remember in my early days, and I said I was in that job that wasn't great, but I had a portfolio. In those days, you actually had a physical portfolio, right? I'm really going back in time. But in that was half and half. That was, this is the work I've done and this is the work I can do. Mm-hmm. And they were the two things, which, like you say, just having that personal stuff in there, there's a confidence, you know, that you can do it, and you've done it in the commercial world. But there's also that sort of other confidence that, wow, they can take me somewhere else that's not been done before, or, you know.
I think it kind of goes into both angles for me. I think, you know, you've got to embrace the commerciality of the industry and actually find joy in what you make, and not, like, you know, I get really excited about business card design because I think it's still one of the most like powerful tools to actually advertise. And I think I love designing business cards, even though it's basically a bit crap on, like, you know, people in the pocket and they put in the wash. But I think you have to find that joy for commercial design and realize that you've been training for 3 years to get to that point, and not lose sight of that, not lose sight of the fact you've worked so hard to be able to do this for a living. So get joy of everything, but at the same time, I am the biggest advocate for passion projects. I think they allow you to explore what's true to yourself. They allow you to break free of kind of the chains of what a client brief might look like. The reason we kind of went to a 4-day working week as the studio was because we wanted to do more side projects and just have fun. So, you know, a couple of months ago, we released a project called the Alternative Pub Passport, which was at the time pubs reopened. And it was just a worksheet for drunk adults. We got 5,000 printed. We put them all over the place. we did the project in like 2 to 3 weeks, and we're treating it like a case study, because every side project you do can be a case study for how you work, what results you can get from it. We got some like national press feature on the project, which was great. So, but we just did it for fun, and it was just who we want to be and the sort of work we want to put out there. And there is something to be said about put out the work into the world that you want to get hired for, especially if you're kind of like in a guy's position where he's obviously getting hired for his distinct style. But at the same time, whenever I was hiring for positions, I always was more interested in what side projects they had in their portfolio than commercial projects, because that's when you actually see a creative at their barest form and actually their truest nature. And I think there's a lot to be said in just don't burn out. Don't burn out over it, but just set yourself like aside, have something going on at all times, just in the background that you can do in the evenings or where you have a spare moment.
And remember, there are no boundaries when it comes to doing your own work. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to adhere to a particular brief or a feeling or a client's ethos or anything. It's all your own imagination and what you can do with that. I know that's where a lot of my kind of passion comes from, just imagining certain things that I haven't seen before as well. That's another thing. I tend to want to. I recently did a film poster a licensed film poster for Clockwork Orange, and it was when the poster got released, a lot of people were like, "I've never seen anything like this before." And my brief or my approach for myself was, well, I'm not going to include orange in the poster, of course. All the identifiable things from that film. I'm going to make it something very different because it was, I hadn't seen anything like that before. So yeah, that's what I would say towards that.
I'm so pleased you mentioned side hustles, because I'm a huge fan and I've seen how they've really opened doors in people's careers. I like the phrase passion projects, because hustle sounds exhausting and you're like, oh, why am I hustling on top of working? Whereas passion projects is meant to reinvigorate your creativity. And there's examples like Matt Dunn was working in-house at a law firm. He did a side hustle that went viral across like BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, and then it got him jobs like Wyden and Kennedy, and then working in San Francisco, and it's endless the amount of people in our industry that have created wonderful passion projects. And also the best advice is make more of the type of work you want to be doing, rather than saying, oh, the agency aren't giving me the kind of work I want to be doing. Do it yourself, create more.
Nothing's stopping you.
Do it. So
also, sorry, Nick, I was going to say,
and then I have to go on to the Q&A. But sorry, Ben, what were you going to say?
I was literally just going to quickly add, I think I completely agree with you. I don't like the term hustle, because I think hustle culture is one of the most toxic things in the world. These stories like, oh, Jim worked 90-hour weeks to get his startup off the ground and stuff. Like, that sounds knackering. Like, why you shouldn't have to hustle that amount to be able to do something like you want to be doing. Like we like I said, if you can make something happen in a 40-hour work week, you can make something happen in an hour of an evening. I think the important part to latch onto is the passion side of it. What are you inspired by? What is it that's quintessentially you? It doesn't have to have like a rewarding outcome. It doesn't have to achieve anything. It can just be something that's a bit of fun. And I think, so don't overthink side projects. Like when I was starting out, I was always like, oh, what's the aim of this? And the moment we stopped doing that, especially as the agency, and just started making stuff, we actually got a lot better results from it. So don't feel that everything has to be super targeted. Don't feel you have to kill yourself in a side project to actually get any results. Just do something that's fun to you and you'll get the rewards.
Yeah. Definitely. I love that project you did, by the way, Ben, the passport one. I saw that.
We went to a lot of pubs.
Yeah.
The reason we did it was just because we wanted to go to drink at loads of different pubs. So we were just going in and having a few pints and leaving them just leaving them vicariously around the place and doing that. It was, that's another thing. If you enjoy something, just make a project around it, because it'll give you an excuse to be able to do it.
So my final question before we dive into the Q&A is, do you have any last pieces of advice for graduates to understand how best to apply themselves in the industry?
I've got one, which is don't think you know it all, because you never will. The moment you think you know it all, you are lost. Don't do it. Do listen to the people around you that you trust and that you admire or you think you can learn from, but do challenge as well. Just because you're coming in at an entry level into industry doesn't mean to say that your voice can't be heard. do call out unacceptable behaviour if you see it. We're all here for you. It doesn't, you know, it's not, this isn't about hierarchy, or I'm quite junior, I can't say anything. Everybody has an equal voice. And be yourself. Don't try and be someone else, because you as yourself are incredible. No one can be you, and you can't be anybody else. So to thine own self be true.
I would say don't overthink things. It's similar to what Ben was saying. When I started my new art style at the beginning of lockdown, I stopped overthinking. I stopped kind of questioning what I was making and just did it. And that has paid dividends. So now when I get a very big client job come through, I normally it's the first things that come into my head, and I start putting them down on paper. And then eventually those things start to filter and materialize into something more finite. But at the beginning, don't overthink it.
Yeah, I think with me, it's, you know, you will cock up and you will make bad decisions, and there will be times when you question your abilities and what you want to do. That's part of the journey. That's part of the fun of it all. You know, careers are long, life is longer. You all have so much time to get to that point you want to reach. I think for me, it's about, you know, you should form connections, get involved in communities, passion projects, challenge yourself, and challenge your own views and values whenever you can. Your life is a combination of, your life is a combination of where you are at the moment in time, and the more experience you can get, the more you will evolve as an individual, and the more you will mess up, and the more you will learn and adapt, and your life will become richer as a result. I think kind of what Mocha just said, ultimately, just don't give into, I guess, don't give into decision paralysis. I think it's important you spend less time thinking and, you know, more time saying yes to the things that you truly believe in that moment you want to be doing. Because, you know, as I said, life is long, and if you get it wrong, you know, you've always got plenty of time to sort it out again.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into the, I've got some questions here from the Q&A, but there were some incredible answers there and some real gems as well from all of you, so thank you. So one of the questions is, has anyone ever felt imposter syndrome? Yeah, I know, right? The biggest question that we all feel all the time, but it's good to talk about it as well. And how do you overcome it?
Firstly, I don't think you ever overcome it. It's always there. And actually, you know, use it to your advantage. And what I mean by that is, again, going back to this, nobody ever knows everything. To have that person on your shoulder saying, mate, you know, you can turn that into positive, because you talk to that imposter person on your, it's a person on my shoulder. I don't know if that's just me visualizing it, person on my shoulder, but almost talk back to him, say, and argue with it a bit, because, you know, people don't, or some people might, but most people who end up progressing through their careers, it isn't an accident. It's because they've worked hard, and they're talented and everything. It's not, you know, so don't ignore it, but don't let it rule your life either. You know, you validate yourself. The reason you're where you are, or the position you've got, the reason you're in the room, or you're doing that piece of work, you've been asked to do that piece of work, is because you're everybody's incredible. And that person I'm talking about on my shoulder doesn't actually exist. It's me talking to me. So have an argument with yourself.
I can follow on from that and say, be kind to yourself as well. Acknowledge that you are feeling imposter syndrome, and just acknowledge it to yourself and say, okay, I'm feeling this way, but I am good at this, or I am kind of happy doing this. It's about being kind to yourself to combat any kind of sense of imposter syndrome or negativity in your mind. Something I learned quite a lot recently.
I think I'm an anomaly because I have never suffered from imposter syndrome. Maybe that's because I'm a middle-class white man and have a lot of privilege attached to that. But ultimately, I also have ADHD and have a chemical detachment between cause and effect. And as a result, I've never really worried about if what I'm doing is good enough or right, or whether I'm good enough for whatever. I just kind of go with the flow. However, what I would say is, the moment I stopped comparing myself to other people and what their journeys doing was the moment I became infinitely happier. everyone is on their own path and journey, and imposter syndrome often creeps in because you're either looking at other people and going, oh, like they're at this position and I'm having to do a similar thing and I don't feel like I'm ready for it, etc. But I think if you just focus on your journey and what you're doing in the moment and what you can take from that experience, whether you have imposter syndrome or not, you will feel better as a result. And I think what everyone else is saying on this discussion, you can't ever get rid of it. If you're someone that is naturally inclined to constantly have imposter syndrome, you can't just get that out. You can't get away from that. So turn it into a positive, trying to find a way to turn that, what you think your weakness is, into your biggest strength. It's what I did with my ADHD. It was the reason I've kind of lost jobs over the years or haven't been able to stay in jobs. The moment I realized I wasn't gonna be able to fight that, so I had to turn it into a strength of how I can communicate better with people, I can do more things at once, I can work quicker, I have more energy. And I saw it as one of my super strength almost. I just became a much happier individual. So yeah, to cut a long thing short, I don't think you can get away from it if you're naturally inclined to have imposter syndrome, but you can turn it into a positive.
Yeah, some great answers. So this next question is, do you have advice on rekindling creative passion? The stress of last year, my degree burnt me out and I've struggled to get going again to find much optimism.
Oof, that's a tough one.
Take a break.
Take a break. Yeah.
Literally. It's what I did when I quit my job due to burnout. I took a year. I'd still freelanced a bit, but I took a year out from the creative industries. I did a job as a kind of still within the creative industries, but I was doing a much more kind of writing sort of job. It wasn't really as much like designing. Give yourself space. I think, as was just mentioned then, be kind to yourself. Like, you don't have to do it all in one go. I think if you're burnt out, you need to give yourself a reset. You need to give yourself a few weeks where you're not trying to put pressure on yourself to be something or do something. And also use it as a bit of a soul searching mission to kind of help refine what you want to be doing in life. Like, you've been training for 3 years to be this thing that everyone has told you this is what a designer is or illustrator or whatever. I think give yourself a few weeks to really just think about what you want to be, because this is the first time in your life no one's telling you what you should be doing. You've got to work it out.
I guess the argument back against that is maybe a lot of students in their early days tend to feel a lot of urgency and a need to get to a position that they think that they should be at a certain time. And what we have to remember is that everybody finds their path across a long period of time. There are people that gain success or don't gain success, just that are happy at certain parts of their career, and they get, this industry is very up and down and it's constantly kind of in flux. And yeah, that's another thing that I had to learn as well, that I needed to stop worrying about the position that I needed to be in at a certain time and just enjoy the time that I was at. But in terms of feeling burnout, also speak to other creatives, acknowledge that you are feeling burnout. I recently on Twitter, I kind of posted a tweet about how I was feeling, and then I put a question at the end saying, is this burnout? And the number of people that were like, it is burnout, you should take a break, go on holiday, take the weekend off, that kind of thing. So asking your friends, using help from people on Twitter is from other creatives is very, very helpful. It has been for me anyway.
I think as well, you can hear us talking about it. We've all been there. You're not alone. You're not the only person who's going through this and going back. Just if you can talk about it, do talk about it to, the people around you who care about you. Because when you do talk about things like that, people open their arms up to you, and it's a wonderful feeling. And I think your brain needs a break. It's been a really incredible, is the word, last sort of 18 months. And it's something none of us in the whole world hasn't experienced before. So you're definitely not going through it on your own. So do talk about it. And as I say, you'll be surprised how many people open their arms up.
Yeah, and it's so important for everybody to know that all these graduates that have been, finishing their degrees in isolation, and that's quite difficult. It's without the buzz of all the other students and looking forward to things. And I guess for a lot of people that tuned in, it's felt like a bit of a chore of, let's just get through this, let's just somehow achieve my degree. And most people in the industry that I've spoken to are struggling, and just because everybody's not always openly putting that on their social media, because we always like to be quite positive, but you know, the general advice about be honest with people, be open, and you'll be amazed by the kindness you'll receive, and don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes even if you can just do 1% every day, and if you just consistently plug away and do that 1%, then you'll end up achieving something, and then just build from that. But another question is, can your passion project be too niche and therefore scare people away?
Your passion project's a reflection of who you are. There's no, I think if you go into a passion project worrying about whether it's too niche or etc., it's probably not the right topic. I think a passion project should feel like it's an extension of you as a person. And I don't think you can ever get, you know, everyone's unique in their outlook or how they interact with the world or how they've been, you know, how they've been molded by their environments. I think a passion project should be particularly niche because ultimately it should be a reflection of you, and there shouldn't be anyone really else out there in the world that is like you.
So yeah, don't feel the pressure. I'm sort of hearing something through that as well, that question, which is, oh my God, I must have a passion project. And is this, and there's a pressure in that. And actually, not everybody has a passion project. It's great to have one, but not everybody does because they're doing other stuff. They might not have time, their lives might be whatever, but exactly, try, it's not a calculated thing. A passion isn't calculated. Passion is something you can't help. You can't help it. So, you know, it might be your passion is cooking, right? You might think, what the hell has that got to do with this industry? Well, there's so much it's got to do with this industry and what you could do with that. You know, my passion's football. There could be so much to do. My passion is, I don't know, lilies, right? It could be as niche as that. There's stuff you can do with that. It's like, just it is, like you said, passion comes from within. It's not calculated.
Yeah, I guess identify what does give you passion, what does drive you to a certain way. I know you know, a lot of my passion comes from film and TV and watching movies and stuff. And I tend to take a lot of ideas and influences from film stills and cinematography and apply them into the work. And it never, I mean, if I were to tell someone that, and then they look at my work, they'd be like, that has no connection whatsoever. But it's gone through the filter of my brain and then applied to a particular personal piece. And it eventually does kind of present itself in a way. Yeah, identifying what you truly are into, I think, is very helpful.
Yeah, and I love what Ben said as well about that whole, it's an extension of who you are. When we used to go more to the pub and people used to say, Nikki, what should I choose as an idea? And I said, well, it's the thing you can't stop talking about down the pub after a few drinks, either because you love it or God, you hate it. And then that's the thing you use your creative skills and you can create something off the back of that to fix a problem. Or
I think that's a good point is, you know, a passion project doesn't have to be always something you enjoy. It can be pushing back against something that you're not happy about. And sometimes the best work I've seen from passion projects has been a response to a current global issue, maybe a current political or environmental or social issue. And because that fire within someone to really want to have a voice about that topic can equally be as amazing, an amazing outcome as something that they're just like, oh, I love football, I grew up playing football. It could be equally as good as something like that.
So my final question from the Q&A is, I never know what to say for expected salary. I don't want to say too high so they don't hire me, but don't want to undersell myself. What would you recommend?
That's quite interesting, because I think it was Cindy Gallop who said, ask for the amount, get to the amount that makes you laugh asking for it, and then just go a little bit under that. Which I think that's such good advice. I think the good thing around that is to talk to other people you know who are at the same sort of level as you and find out what they're earning, right? Because there's nothing better to push you to ask for more money if someone else is earning more money than you and you think, I might be working harder than them, or I might be more talented than them. That's a really good motivator. That's going against everything we've just said about comparing yourself. But the benchmarks give you the power to go in and say, yes, but I know that this is the benchmark. I've talked to 4 people in the business and they're at the same level as me, and this is the They've, people don't talk about their salaries, and that's quite an interesting taboo. I think it's one of the last taboos in agency life, about being open about what we earn. And I'm not telling you what I earn. If anybody sends that question in, I'm not doing that now. It's also quite destructive, but yeah, get some benchmarks. That gives you, information is power, and take that in with you. Or talk to, recruiters and say, what, you can ring 2 or 3 and say, what do you think I should be asking? They're brilliant allies.
I think I would say work out what you need to live off, add 20%. I'm a big advocate for businesses declaring their salaries. I think, and not as in like the people who work for them, I mean for a job role. I think when a company says salary unspecified, I think a candidate needs to know they can afford to live off what you're willing to pay them. So I think there's something to be said about companies now being pushed towards actually declaring what the salary band is. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to you as an individual. I don't think, you can look at the entry level role, or somewhere between like 18 to 23,000. I think everyone's different. Everyone has different requirements. They might be looking after like a sick parent. They might have siblings they have to take care of, blah, blah, blah. I think you've got to kind of look at what your needs are, look at what you actually need to live off. And then obviously you want to have some fun at the end of the day as well. So I would say how we run the business when we started out was we looked at what salary me and my business partner wanted. We then crunched the numbers and we said we need to make this much in a year to do that, and we want to have fun. So it can be kind of mathematical, but I definitely think that, like, especially any of the sort of young women watching this, you guys should be pushing for more money. I think
what you can do, the gender pay gap, go to the IPA site, gender pay gap, tell you what the agencies who've submitted their details, what their gender pay gaps are. And then maybe, again, the information is power. And so if your gender pay gap is 18%, then that's what you should say. I want to push what I've got in my head. You might have a number in your head. Add that on. Just add it on, because it makes you feel like information is power. So stuff like that. And I think it is difficult, because as you go through your career, there will be people. It's hard for creative people, because it's not like it's not that linear. You're paid for your talent, which is hard to quantify and is subjective. So there's that. You're also paid for what you produce, the validation of what you produce. So often awards and things like that are what creatives use as leverage to earn more money. So think about the things that you can use. But yeah, it is difficult for creative people. And I think that's something, we're not great at asking for money, because we love what we do, and that's not why we're doing it. So we're not thinking, I need to get to that step, I need to get that step, I need to get to that step. It's not how we work. We just want to be paid enough, like you say, to have a half decent life, have some fun, and to be paid for what we love doing is such a wonderful thing in the first place. So that gratefulness can work against us a little bit, like, I was talking about.
On that note, everybody, I'm afraid we're out of time, but that was a great session. I also have a salary guide for anyone that's interested, and Cindy Gallop is great, as Nikki said, to follow about those sorts of things. So I will hand this now over to Marie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nikki, and thank you everyone so much. I have been absolutely hooked on this talk. It's been so interesting. So thank you all so much for your time.